We're good, Roland?
Not quite. It takes about 20 seconds to get the stream fully on. Let's see, you got about another, we're good. We're live.
Okay, it is 5:34 on 4/20, and this is the SPED Curriculum Subcommittee. And to kick off, we are formally announcing that we're changing this committee's name from the Ad-Hoc SPED Committee to represent its more permanent committee status. It's being now called the SPED Curriculum Subcommittee. And that's a reflection of Dr. Estrella's efforts to ensure that special education does not exist in isolation, and instead it's a dedicated time slot for a conversation as part of the larger curriculum discussion. So on the call with us today, or the Zoom with us today, we have other members of the curriculum committee, and I will be joining the curriculum committee. And we will now carve out time as part of in the curriculum committee to talk about things that we're talking about here in the SPED committee to ensure it's a very inclusive conversation. So with that, we have some new committee members. And our minutes taker could probably benefit from us just going around the horn and everybody introducing themselves. So why don't we start with let's see who's in my bubble first. Okay, Suzanne, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as the new board member?
Sure. Hi, I'm Suzanne Korshutz. I'm new to the board and really happy to be taking part in this newly named SPED Curriculum Committee.
Thank you. And Sherelle, you're kind of sort of new. You've been with us, as we've done committee shifts in the last few months, but for the minutes of benefit, could you do your introduction as well?
Sure. I'm Sherelle Harris. My second time on the board, curriculum chair, and SPED has always been near and dear to my heart. Even in my library work, we have a program called SPED Matters because it does matter. So I'm glad that it's, that it's getting a bigger role as part of the curriculum. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And for the board members' benefits, I'll go around the horn and introduce you to our parent and teacher volunteers who also join this group. The first one is Marissa.
Sorry, trouble getting off mute. My name is Marissa Mangone, and I am a parent of a special education fourth grader and a gen ed fifth grader at Marvin Elementary School. And I also work with a nonprofit organization, the Child Guidance Center of Mid-Fairfield, that does a lot of partnerships with the district as well. And I'm just happy to be part of this conversation. And yeah, that's it.
Marissa is also a member of NSPED PAC.
Yes, thank you, Erica. I am as well.
As is Amy, so I'll let Amy go next.
I'm Amy Hodgins. I am a parent of two kids, one at Ponus who has an IEP and another one at Fox Run with an IEP. And I'm also part of the NSPED PAC committee. Thanks.
And Kelly?
Hi, my name's Kelly Dominic. I'm a first grade teacher at Kendall. I'm also a parent of a child with special needs, and I also work at the Carver Center and run their literacy program.
And Eric.
Hi, Eric Niederer, a parent of a seventh grader at POTUS Ridge who's in the NEST program, and a fourth grader at Fox Run who's a neurotypical, and I'm also part of NSPED PAC.
Okay, and with that, I think on the agenda, we can move over to ESY, Yvette.
Thank you. I also want to introduce myself. I'm Yvette Gorovich. I'm the Chief of Specialized Learning and Student Support Services. And joining me is Dr. Stacy Heiligenthaler, who is Director of PPS. Welcome. I'm going to reset my language and not call it SPED. It's a personal issue with me. So I'm just going to reset it, and we're going to talk about, and I love Eric's lead, we're going to talk about kids who may be neurotypical or kids with special education needs or IEPs or disabilities. It's just my own language that I'm practicing my anti-ableist mindset. So I just put it out there. So I'm going to share the screen, and tonight our one topic is ESY. And I'm not going to put it into the full presentation mode because every time I do, it knocks me off of the meeting and I don't want to log back in. So please forgive me for showing my sidebar. So as you know, students with disabilities who meet criteria set by state regulation may be eligible for extended school year services. Typically and historically, that was designed to prevent substantial regression. We've moved from that somewhat, but it is still following very specific criteria with regard to progress made on goals. I do want to point out that students with disabilities are general ed students first, and many students who are eligible for summer school, and we'll talk about that overlap, are students who fall into the subgroup of students with disabilities, but they may not, some may not, many may not be eligible for ESY. So it's not an exclusionary issue. All the students who meet criteria for ESY, and I know that curriculum met earlier today to discuss that, whether they have an IEP or not, whether they're a student with a disability, whether they're a student with a 504 plan, if they meet the eligibility for summer academy, summer school, they may attend that. And we'll talk about the overlap in a moment.
Yvette, are you okay?
Thank you, Sherelle, I am.
Okay.
So the first thing that I want to point out is that we know that there has been an impact during COVID for all students. We know that there's been an impact for our most vulnerable students, and that is why we used resources to ensure that our most vulnerable learners had the opportunity to attend in person 5 days a week. Nonetheless, given school closures last year, given hybrid models that families may have opted into for consistency, given quarantine periods, we recognize that there are substantial numbers of kids that need additional support. Many of those students are students with disabilities, but as Eric pointed out, neurotypical kids also experience this. Nationally, the thinking is not so much on learning loss to be eligible for this additional support, but rather there was unfinished learning. Some literature talks about interrupted instruction. So we need to move into that thinking that many students did not have the opportunity for the full instructional learning and teaching experience this year. Nationally, people are also talking about moving from the thought of recovery through the lens of social and emotional learning into renewal. And this I say to you, both as a professional, as a special education leader, and also someone who's been watching my own grandchildren go through this process of returning to school. And it is much like many of you have shared with me in terms of the excitement and the hope of our children when they return to school and they have a renewed excitement for learning. And yet we must recognize the trauma and the social emotional support that all of our students need and our staff as well. And then finally, moving from the concept of remediation into acceleration. If we can accelerate the learning through access to summer academies, through access to after school or before school learning, using some of the recovery funding, and that language comes from Congress, but use it for acceleration so that we can assist our students to finish the learning that was interrupted because of the pandemic. So that's just a mindset that I ask that you, join me in thinking about. So Stacy's going to talk a little bit about the numbers of students eligible for ESY, meeting that criteria. And after she does that, I'll review again the demographics that I know Donalda may have already shared with some of you on the curriculum committee. So Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you now to discuss preschool and elementary ESY.
So as Yvette was sharing, these are the numbers of students who qualify for ESY. Many of the numbers are duplicated between students who qualify for the General Education Summer Academy and also qualify for ESY. Parents will have the opportunity to choose between the two options. But so these are straight numbers of who qualifies. Knowing that as we talk about where things are located, not all of these students will be attending ESY. Many will be attending the Summer Academy, and we've been working with Donalda, and I think Yvette alluded, she's going to talk a little bit further about that later on, of how we're going to support the students who are special ed, who are attending the Summer Academy.
So
go ahead.
So as you can see, the elementary school students who meet the criteria for extended school year, you see where they're coming from, that is 156 students. When we look in a moment, K-8, you'll see that there are another 84 middle school students. When we look at the total number of students who meet the criteria on the benchmark for summer school, there are 468 students identified as having a disability. And the difference between those two numbers, between the ESY and the students eligible for summer school or summer academy, we recognize those students will need support. We recognize that any student that falls below the 40th percentile, and that was our internal cut mark for summer school, as you discussed in the prior committee, will need support. So just as we did last summer, we looked at how can we build in, through a concept of universal design, special education supports and interventions, whether they be from our special ed teachers, our counseling support staff, our speech pathologists, to support the general education summer school program. And it will also be incumbent upon us, as we're mandated to do, to meet the needs of the mandated IEP extended school year services should a parent opt into ESY. So again, Amy, I'm just using you as an example, may choose to have her child, if eligible, participate in ESY, and Amy will tell you where the program will be. And based upon your child's IEP, you will know how many hours in the related services that are mandated. Or you may opt into the general ed program and know that there will be supports and services infused into that program, but not necessarily IEP driven. It is a parent's choice. We recognize that Norwalk is a very inclusive school system. We want to do better. We want to talk about mindset. We know that inclusion is more than placing a kid in a classroom. It's more than geography, I always say. And yet we know that 95% of our kids spend the great majority of their day in general ed classrooms, particularly in pre-K through 8. So we don't want to move students into more restrictive settings in the summer than they typically would participate in during the school year. So that is our balance, recognizing that all students need that support for the interrupted instruction.
Yvette, to ask you a question about this chart. Some of our schools with the highest percentage of high need students have the lowest totals in terms of referrals or eligibility. Can you talk a little bit about, I see Kelly's chatting this, what qualifies a student for ESY? And I don't like Silvermine isn't actually showing up on this at all.
This, Stacey, you want to talk about eligibility?
Sure. The state actually has some very clear guidelines on eligibility, and the district has an ESY eligibility checklist that goes through the criteria that would qualify a student for ESY services. Examples of that are the regression and recoupment criteria. The ability, another criteria has to do with students who are in a life skills program and need that continuity between programs. I don't have my ESY sheet in front of me. Those are the two big ones that typically qualify our students. I think some of our programs that have some of the larger numbers do have some of our special programs in there, such as if NARAMAC is somewhat high, and we are looking at those numbers, but there is a special program, our transition program, our ELA math transition program there. Rowayton has our special class program for our kids with more significant disabilities. Tracy which is 2 classes. Tracy has 2 classes of our students with behavioral, our success program, our therapeutic program. Fox Run has Nest, as well as many of the students that started with IPPI years ago are still, when we transitioned to district staff, remained at Fox Run. So there's the remnants of one program plus our Nest programs. And we also have co-teaching programs at Brookside and Kendall. And so that's where some of those numbers come from. Some of the other schools, for the students that have a larger number of students, because we look at the least restrictive environment for all students, there are students who are in the general education program that still might be on an alternate program. So for example, students, DTI is not only provided in a special class. So some of those students are still attend their home school with intensive support. And so those would be students that qualify for ESY services. So it's a combination of, trying to spread out our district programs, as well as having many students attend their home schools, even when they might be having on an alternate program, and then providing that support, which would then qualify them for ESY.
So Kendall in particular has popped up in the last year, as we talked about year-round programming, and we looked very closely at their stats, and they happen to be one of the lower referrals here. Can you speak specifically to Kendall, and then also why Silvermine doesn't show up at all?
So Silvermine has no students that were recommended by the PPT for ESY services. And Kendall also does have does not have any of the more intensive specialized programs district-wide. Kendall is an interesting discussion. When we look at percentages, and that this is another discussion, not necessarily an ESY discussion, but when you look at percentages of students with disabilities in terms of our disproportionality data, or in terms of just, subgroups of kids, Kendall still is one of the lowest percentages of total population, students with IEPs. Kendall has proportionately one of the smallest percentages of its population to have IEPs. That is not to say that Kendall isn't providing intensive interventions, and that's also a curriculum discussion, but the numbers of students identified as disabled is small. That continues to be a fact, although we have established district-wide full-day co-teaching programs there. So as we built that, some of the students attending those full-day co-teaching programs are not specifically zoned for Kendall. So that explains why, relatively speaking, they have 10 students eligible for ESY. That's not to say that they don't have many more students. And I would have to, pull that data from curriculum, how many students they have eligible for summer school who also have IEPs.
So can I also add for Kendall, historically, because they have run a very specific summer program, there's really good data from the school from the last 2 years with, they were, I want to say Jumpstart, but I know I don't think that's the program, but it was the community-based program. And so there were many discussions with Kendall specifically about having the students participate in the program that was being offered at the school as opposed to ESY. Many students participated in that. And so has been data coming out of there about, again, meeting the criteria for ESY and seeing that the program that they were in met the needs of the students that were there. The other thing that I just want to mention about the numbers is that ESY is not only academic support, that some of these numbers could also be for students who might have only qualified for a related service as well. So for example, speech and language, occupational therapy, counseling. So each service is looked at in determining ESY eligibility. And so some of these numbers represent not necessarily students who would also qualify for the academic piece, but might qualify for a related service piece. We usually have about 20, 25 students a year that qualify only for related services and not the academic portion as well. So those numbers are mixed in and not parsed out because they qualify for ESY. It's just a different type of need. Because again, this is based on the IEP and it's individualized to each student and their needs.
Thank you.
Stacy and Erica and Yvette, can I just jump in real quick? Just to comment on that, as you may know, Kendall was my home school, and I was on the SGC there and know the student population, although now it's a little dated. It's a little concerning to me that the numbers are low as a percentage of the total population, and ESY ESY qualification versus recommendation. It's a little concerning to me, just as a parent with a little bit of knowledge regarding that particular school, that there may be under identification or under reporting. So, based on Erica's comment, and I appreciate that, and the information that you've provided on the student population, it's a little concerning to me as a parent that it may be under identification, under reporting. So that's the only comment I wanted to make.
So Eric, a major focus of the district right now is talking about SRBI and early interventions. so that a school that may have a large percentage of students not mastering at proficiency or above, on whatever measure we're using, whether that's formative assessment or summative end of year assessment, the district is making a huge commitment to ensure that there are interventionists and coaches that can follow an SRBI model, specifically to provide that early intervention so that we don't need to increase the identification. And we're particularly focusing on grades K through 3 as the state requires us to do. But many of you know, we still have kids in 8th grade and 10th grade that need intervention from years past. So I just put that out there, Eric. You know, when there's debate, we tell staff to evaluate. But once the district fully implements the SRBI thinking, planning that's currently in formation, once all the schools have the reading and math interventionists and they're trained in the gold standard of intervention and they have the time to implement with fidelity, I think this discussion about worrying that kids are going unidentified will decrease because the schools will have the data on implementation with fidelity. And if kids are not closing the gap, particularly early on in grades K through 3, the schools will move them to referral. It's a process that is not currently being implemented with fidelity, as most of you know, because we didn't have the staff to do it in general ed and SRBI.
Sherelle, I saw your bubble go off. Did you have any comments? Okay.
I'll
All right.
move on to the middle schools. Here you see the
Sorry,
numbers.
Erica. No, I didn't have any comment, but I was concerned about Kendall too. So that'll be interesting. We can bring that up in curriculum and just see what Donalda has to say.
Thank you.
And I think we should be as concerned about underreporting and
Yeah.
under-identification as we are about disproportionality and over-identification. I mean, they're both areas of concern. We know what our disproportionality data looks like because we've been studying it all year with Eddie, with Dr. Fergus. But I think both are areas of concern. And my response as district leadership is we really need to implement the SRBI paradigm and staff it and train it and hold folks accountable for looking at that data, which is progress monitoring data, not benchmark data and not end of the year summative data that I call up and I say, oh, Marissa, we just got in, but rather we're watching that very closely, every week over 8-12 weeks, and we know what to do with those kids. Either
So
move to referral or we see gap closing, and we know that the interventions are being effective.
So if that, Erica, is it okay?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yvette, I heard you say that that we need to implement SRBI with fidelity. Do we have the staffing now?
So there are proposals. I don't need to inform this group about budget concerns. However, there are plans to have as non-negotiables the interventionists in all of the elementary and middle school. I know that the finance committee is still looking at how to use recovery funds and other funding sources so that we can build capacity to do that. So that's my short answer to you, Sherelle. Not yet, but but I believe we will. And I believe it's a non-negotiable looking at the future.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually very exciting to think about.
Mhm.
Long time coming. Here's the middle school. Again, you see some discrepancies. We do have special district-wide programs in all of our middle schools. So we're looking at where there are suspiciously high or low, and we're giving guidance to the PPT teams. And again, this is data as we know it now, subject to change next week or in 2 weeks as new PPTs are conducted and students become eligible for ESY or no longer require ESY. So I don't know if there are any questions there.
I mean, obviously Nathan Hale sticks out.
And you know what we know from implementation and what we know from what was confirmed by the Urban Collaborative, we need to ensure, when I say implementation with fidelity of SRBI, we also need to ensure implementation with fidelity of checklists and standards set by the state, so that every student, regardless of neighborhood or school attending, has the same access through the PPT process, because everyone is following the same guidelines set by the State Department of Education, and there are checklists. So this is not, you know, someone's opinion. It's based on. And now let me go to the high school. You see the numbers. Again, the high school numbers are relatively low. Many students go for credit recovery. There is the 9th grade academy that is general ed. Again, we are talking about infusing special education supports and services into the summer program to meet those needs. Norwalk Next Steps are our 18 to 22-year-old students that have left high school, and this is really a transition program towards independence in living, in life skills, in self-care skills, shopping, budgeting, money management, as well as the vocational program. This program is all community-based. Project Search is our 18 to 22-year-old program. We really do need to correct the slides. That is a fully inclusive program on Norwalk Community College's campus. It is a 1-year to 18-month program leading towards competitive entry-level employment, and it follows the national evidence-based Project Search program. Norwalk is the only school district to be implementing in the region, and it is, you know, one of those crown jewels in the crown of service delivery for students. So those are the 2 transition groups. Most of our students that we place in out-of-district programs, typically many of them meet the criteria around regression and recruitment. Thank you. However, students attending charters, our residents attending charters in other districts, as well as the private, parochial, and charters within our geographic location, may also be eligible for the same criteria for ESY. So that number 69 represents many of our PPT placed students, as well as students recommended who may be attending private or charters. So that's a mixed number. So let's talk about the location now. As I'm sure curriculum heard earlier, there are plans to mix, have clusters so that we are not on site of any school under renovation or without access to air conditioning. So the clusters that were discussed in curriculum, we have the same clusters. We're not putting an ESY class where there isn't an opportunity for integration with neurotypical peers or other programs. Also in curriculum, I know that you discussed the enrichment opportunities with our community-based partners, museums, and the aquarium and so on. So all of our ESY program classes will have those same enriched opportunities. And it's during those opportunities that we really are looking for the social skill support so that our students with the most severe disabilities that may be eligible for ESY that need very intensive academic or language intervention by specialists also have the opportunity to engage and participate in that enrichment in the co-curricular nature of our summer school program. We need to ensure that we're providing those opportunities for our students and assume competence that when you give them the opportunity to be integrated and fully participate, they benefit from that as long as there's supported activities happening during that time. All of the middle school students in ESY will be at PONUS. You see how many classes we're projecting. And again, that's consistent with the summer school. Brian McMahon and Norwalk High School will continue programming. Currently, our next steps is at the HSC building on Park Street. And we're anticipating that will continue to be its home base. And 80% of their time is in the community and job development sites. And we will be continuing the Twilight Academy at Norwalk High School. As you know, I shared with you last month, we piloted a program, we started a program in December for those students that were completely disengaged remotely or in person, really looking at juniors and seniors to get them back on track. We have about 34, 35 students currently enrolled. There is joy happening in person, both from the staff and the students to reconnect with learning. And we are planning on continuing that in the summer for another group or another student that didn't complete coursework. And we're looking to run program from 4 to 8 p.m. Again, there are students that need to be the childcare provider during the day for some of their younger siblings, or they are the working members of the family or contributing to work and still need to have that opportunity to go to school. So we're meeting the students based upon their real life needs. And we're very delighted to have the support to continue the program. So that ends our summary. If there are any additional questions, Stacy and I are happy to respond. If not, I turn it back to our.
How's recruitment going? We just heard in curriculum that summer staff recruitment has been a challenge.
So we're doing well with recruitment. We have not yet assessed how many students will be attending summer school. So, you know, how much staff to infuse into the summer school program. We believe we will cover all the ESY needs. Stacy reported to me earlier in the week that we have some student teachers, some pipeline, some speech pathology final semester students that will be joining us, and that really helps with pipeline recruitment. Erica, you and I have discussed, retaining staff. We're in good condition as of right now. I'll have a further report for you next month.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Amy, did you want to give an NSPED pack update?
Sure. We're wrapping up our year. We're putting together our report that we focused with communication and IEP compliance, and we're going to present that to the Board of Ed, I believe sometime June and July. And we are also looking for members. We're looking for parent members as well as educator members. So if you're interested, please reach out to NSPED PAC, and we will be more than happy to bring you on. Thanks.
Amy, we should also announce that you recruited student members.
Yes, we need student members. We have 2 right now, and they're high school students and they're graduating, so they're leaving us. So we are looking for student members. The only requirement is they have to be in high school or the transition program.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's it on our agenda. I'm toggling back and forth. Yep. Okay. Oh, approval of the minutes. So our board members are new. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the minutes. I looked up how it works if you haven't been present in terms of Robert's rules. You could vote your confidence in the minutes taker if you are not present for the minutes, or I can table them and give you some time to look through it. Suzanne and Sherelle.
Any option to abstain, or is your preference that we look through them and then just vote the confidence?
So if you could abstain if Suzanne was willing to approve them. Eventually, we do have to either approve them.
Oh, I see. Because we're
yeah.
the only
Yeah, because Barbara was the only person present for the last 2. But I'm happy to table it again if you want to take more time with it.
I honestly would.
Okay.
Suzanne, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, because I don't remember seeing the minutes for the last meeting. I got the agenda, but I didn't see I don't think I got the minutes. I could have missed them. I'm happy to read them, and next time you vote to say I agree, I have confidence in the minute taker, but I'd also like to just be sure I read them in fairness to doing it right, Erica.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So let me follow up and just make sure you're on that distribution list. And otherwise, I can ask for a motion to adjourn.
Erica, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Will we ever get any of the things that were shared in advance when you send the agenda?
You will, and that's just a product of our distribution list right now. So I will make sure the minutes and the presentations that you're added to that distribution list.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay.
And I'll move the motion to adjourn.
Okay. Give me a second. Okay, so we're all in favor then?
Yep. Aye.
All right. So with that, at 6:18, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight and the prep that went into it, Stacy and Yvette.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.